Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We've arrived at the time for our first speaker today. If anyone can hear me over in the breakfast area, now would be a great time to come into the ballroom and to take your seats. Thanks, Ezrin. So we're incredibly fortunate to have a great friend of the ICA come and talk to us today. Mark Pryor, Chairman and Chief Executive of the SEAM, a man whose deep understanding and engagement in all matters technical and the application of new technologies has been a core feature of his career throughout his professional life and is well known to many of you. Mark Pryor is going to come and talk to us about something I know absolutely nothing about. I'm just chatting to him just now. I don't even know what the title means, but Web3 and the Metaverse are two terms that I'm looking forward very much to understanding a bit better. And I know, because you're such an advocate for technology, that you'll be advising us and enlightening us really on how to make best use of new technologies for the cotton world. So Mark, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, good morning. Thank you to the ICA for having me today, and thank all of you for showing up after the awesome party last night. It's hard to hit that snooze button and come in, or not hit the snooze button, whichever way it works. So there's actually a great history of a guy from Memphis, Tennessee that hits the stage in Vegas, but I don't sing very well, and I didn't wear my blue suede shoes, so anyway. 63% of the global population is now using the internet. It's a remarkable statistic that's recent. 63%. And of that, so that represents about 5 billion people. 4.65 billion are social media users. So large adoption. Those that are using the internet are using social media. I found that a very fascinating statistic. Data never sleeps, right? This is the city that never sleeps. Data also never sleeps. So looked at some statistics that were recently published about how much data is produced in 1 minute. And 16 million text messages per minute. It's quite a bit. 230 million emails. We still love email, right? Lots of messages going back and forth. 350,000 tweets, and I think today there's probably more going on with all the various things happening in the world. But that's about 6,000 tweets per second. That's pretty incredible to think about that. And then looking at the activity comparison over 2013, so just about 10 years ago, you can see that there's some interesting trends. Google queries are up to 5.9 million per second. The hours of YouTube video uploaded have increased substantially from 48 to 500 hours of video produced per minute for YouTube. Emails sent is kind of an interesting statistic there. It hasn't really changed that much since 2013. I say that, I mean, it's, 20-something million email messages. But I think the reason for that is a lot of the technologies for Teams, instant messaging, and Slack and things like that are replacing the need for emails. So it's all about the data, as you've seen in the sessions that we had earlier. Data was a key topic. And in looking at the BCI report that was released not too long ago for 2030, the word data occurs over 70 times in their plan and their vision. And it's not uncommon for other folks. Data is definitely going to be driving what we do and continues to drive what we do. 90% of all the data in the world today was created in the last 2 years alone. It's remarkable. And we're emitting data constantly. We have thermostats in our home that are connected to the internet. the internet in your pocket, all of these devices are just emitting mounds and mounds of data. And we've come to embrace it. So we love our devices. We love what it does for us. All the services of the internet, internet-connected devices. We've embraced it greatly. But it wasn't always the case. So back in 1995, which doesn't seem like that long ago, I've got a few extra gray hairs than I had back in the day, there were a TV show, the Today Show. They were talking about the internet, and they were asking, what is the internet? They didn't really know what this thing was. So let's listen.
Back now at 56 past, I wasn't prepared to translate that as I was doing that little tease.
Oh, that's
that little
right.
mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At?
See, that's what I said. Katie said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd never heard
Or
it.
around
I'd never
or
heard it
about.
said. I'd always
That's
seen the
right.
mark, but never heard
Yeah.
it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
Yeah, I heard
something
around
big
or
fight
about.
up in the lunchroom the other
See,
week.
there it is. Violence at NBC. GE.com. I mean,
Well, Allison should know.
what
do you
is
say to that,
internet
Allison?
anyway?
Internet is that
Massive computer
right,
network.
the one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? That's big. How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
No, she can't say anything in 10 seconds or less.
Oh, Allison will be in the studio shortly.
What is
What
it?
does it mean?
It's a giant computer network made up of started from.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell us what this was.
It's like
You've
a
been looking in the
computer
dictionary.
billboard.
It's not in it. It's a computer billboard, but it's
Right.
nationwide, and it's several universities and everything all joined together. And
Right.
And others can access it.
Right.
And it's getting bigger and bigger all the time.
It
Just
came
great.
in really handy during the quake. A lot of people, that's how they were communicating out to tell family and loved ones they were okay because all the phone lines were down.
I was telling Katie, and I've
But
been
you don't
talking.
need that. You don't need a phone line to operate internet.
No.
Sure doesn't seem like that long ago, but the world has definitely changed in the embracing of the internet. So since we last met, let's go back in time. I was presenting at the ICA trade event in Singapore. It was a great time. We were talking about some new emerging technologies, some that many of you were familiar with and some that you weren't. But we were talking about blockchain technology. It's kind of an overused buzzword. What is this thing? But it has some interesting possibilities that we were exploring at that time. So cryptocurrency was the topic of conversation then, because there really wasn't many applications that were using the technology at the time except for cryptocurrencies, and it was very early. So let's look at charts. You guys love charts, I see, in different presentations, and you're a chart group. So let's look at this chart here for Bitcoin, US dollar comparison here year over year. And we were there at the time when we were talking about the technology and what the promise was and what might happen. You see the volatility has been enormous. I mean, even in the past 3 weeks, you've seen it. Even the past few days, you're seeing what's happening to the crypto markets with Binance and FTX and some of the crypto exchanges that are having some issues for whatever reason that might be. But we were there. And now, since then, where we are today, there's 21,000 cryptocurrencies that are out there. A lot of people know maybe 5 or 10 or something like that. They don't have any idea that it's 21,000. And all this technology is using and based upon blockchain technology. 520 exchanges, crypto exchanges that are out there. You may know of Coinbase, you may know of some others, Binance and FTX we just talked about, but there's 520, give or take. 1 trillion in global market cap, represented by cryptocurrencies. Now, we've seen that cryptocurrencies are not a hedge against inflation. Didn't really work. It's not like gold, right? It didn't really work with that, but it's certainly being embraced by the commercial side and consumer side as well. So the killer app for blockchain at the time was cryptocurrency, digital money. But we were also talking about the promise of using this technology in other areas. How can we use this to solve some problems in the supply chain? How can we use it to solve this Rube Goldberg type approach that we have? It sort of works with duct tape and baling wire. You can sort of get some things going in the supply chain, but it's very paper-laden processes. And there's lots of efforts going on to improve the digitization of the supply chain, as you well know, a lot of you. But where's our silver bullet? What happened? How come we don't have the success in this area like we have in cryptocurrencies, if you want to call it a success? It's actually working on a large global scale. Why isn't it working? So just step back a bit. Let's talk about some of the characteristics that make this technology interesting. It's decentralized. So the technology is not controlled or governed by a single entity. It's distributed. So instead of the information being stored in one location by one huge organization, it's stored all over. Hundreds of thousands of computers are participating in the networks that make this possible. The data itself is synchronized. So it's always current. So even though you may have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of computers that are operating in concert, it's being continuously synchronized, up to date. The information is immutable. It can't change. So a transaction that happened 6 years ago, time-stamped with that point in time, you can't go back and change it. It's as if it's etched in stone. And that's not a bug, that's a feature for some of the verifiability, things that we want, authenticity, the preservation of data and records. It's a very important characteristic. And then lastly, cryptographically secure. It can't be too secure. You see what's going on in various other areas, so the cryptography that makes this possible is truly remarkable. So the promise is storing digital records, which we've seen, exchanging digital assets, executing smart contracts. Those are just some of the things that blockchain technologies are capable of. But there's been some challenges. So let's talk about why this technology wasn't the silver bullet to solve some of our supply chain issues, some of these other things that we'd like to look at, except aside from cryptocurrency. So let's look at the first challenge. The supply chain, for supply chain efficiency and advancement in the supply chain, it requires interoperability, working with others. If you look at the supply chain, it's very complex, as you well know. Lots of parties in different areas of the world doing different things. Their systems are very dissimilar in many cases. And in order to gain rapid efficiency, disruptive efficiency, you have to be able to work with other systems. Interoperability also requires cooperation and collaboration. And this may mean with your competitor or with other entities that are not even in your country. And that's difficult. It's very difficult to get folks around the table and agree on how things will work and how you can communicate together. But it's absolutely a fundamental requirement for advancement in the space. So a lot of initiatives went out and they took that out. They didn't really focus on that piece that's fundamentally required for advancement in that space, and they put the cart before the horse. And so they went out and they created these systems, sprinkled a little blockchain on them, and called them a solution. Right? You see that. A lot of folks will tout it's a blockchain-enabled solution, but at the end of the day, it's nothing but a siloed, centralized implementation. In many, many cases, you see it out there. So you see, in this case here, you've got several different initiatives, and very few of them actually interoperate. It's a real shame. But things are changing. Things are changing rapidly and very recently. But what is the secret sauce for all this to work and give us the efficiencies that we actually need and that we're promised? And it's data standards. All right, that's the most boring thing to a technologist. Someone that architects software is data standards. Someone has to define what these terms are, what they do, what they mean, how they can provide interoperability with others. And let's look at a model that actually works, whether it's antiquated or not. It does work for global finance transactions, cross-border, is SWIFT. SWIFT's been around since the 70s. But what they did is they did come together in the 70s. You think about it. We didn't have the internet. We did have systems that were coming about. And most of you use SWIFT today. There's millions of transactions that are occurring every day through SWIFT. But they came around the table and they agreed on standards. How can we define this documentary letter of credit and all the components that make up that so that these systems can consume this information and provide some efficiencies? We wouldn't be able to do what we do today without SWIFT. So hats off to SWIFT, whether they're a little dated in their approach because of where we are with the technology space today, but they actually did something very valuable to all of you and to your systems, for your systems. So our shipping side is very paper laden, as I mentioned. Lots of paper documents being interchanged and exchanged. And we have to figure out how can we bring some efficiencies to this area. And there's a massive amount of work being done to do this. A lot of you in this room are doing it today. But when it comes down to it, standards are going to play an instrumental role in advancing that area. So there's an initiative that I think many of you may be familiar with, and if you're not, I hope that you would look into it, is the Digital Container Shipping Association, DCSA. This is a nonprofit organization. They were formed in 2019, and they are defining standards for the industry. So it's vendor neutral, so it doesn't matter what software you use, whether it's an IBM solution or some private solution, whatever it is, vendor neutral, it doesn't matter, technology agnostic, and they're providing data standards on behalf of all of us. And when I discovered this a few years back, I thought, this is great because, as I said before, standards are the most boring piece of technology's person's life. No one wants to just sit and work with data standards. And if someone was to define those and govern those for us, all the better. And they're doing it. So I mentioned field names. They've defined what they are, what they mean. Value formats. How do you define what a date field looks like, or a time element, or whatever the code values are that describe the type of data and transactions that are going on. And they've done quite a bit of work since 2019. They started with the bill of lading. A lot of people do. That's a great one to start at. Go ahead and jump in there with that one. And then they carried it further. Track and trace. Think of all the data that goes on in track and trace interoperability with systems. The booking process, that's a very new one that they're actually working on. Operational vessel schedules. Just-in-time port call, and the last one, load list and bait plan. I'm not sure exactly what the details are there, but many of you probably are familiar with what that is. So they're not sitting idle. They didn't just come out in 2019, create data standards for a bill of lading. They continue to advance it. And these standards that are out there are free. They're open. They encourage collaboration and participation, and to adopt these into systems. And for any software architects in the room, I know there's a couple, because I've had conversations. If these standards were to have existed prior to creating these applications, we absolutely, as a software architect, we absolutely would have used them. Why? Because it'll save you a ton of money, a ton of time and money to do it. So a lot of these software teams are looking at the need to transmit or create information, and they're coming up with their own data definitions, their own ontologies, their own syntax, because they don't have a blueprint to work with. If they did, you'd save time for the software engineer, but you also are supporting a greater vision towards global interoperability in the shipping space. A few names here that are supporting this. I say a few names and it's kind of tongue-in-cheek. These are major, major names that you all know very well. They have all come together and embraced the standards and have agreed that they are going to use these standards. To me, that's super special. You know, yes, this technology that we're going to talk about even more shortly is very, very powerful, but even more powerful is to have someone that can define and govern these standards that allow this to actually work. Hasn't worked really yet, but I think it has promise. I think it has enormous promise. Challenge number 2. Why this technology hasn't been the silver bullet yet. So these systems, based on blockchain technologies, as you may know, are extremely energy intense, right? You hear about it. What if I told you Bitcoin mining uses more electricity than 139 countries? So it's very inefficient. Doesn't mean that the models weren't very smart in what they did. It's just genius. But some of the models need to be reworked for this very reason, energy consumption, massive. So let's just look at Bitcoin blockchain. I don't mean to confuse anything with cryptocurrency, but Bitcoin uses blockchain technology, and thus the reason we're going to talk about the energy consumption there. So if you look at the energy consumption, it continues to go up with the proliferation of cryptocurrencies, and Bitcoin in this particular case. The carbon footprint, though, annualized, is comparable to Colombia, the carbon footprint of Colombia. It's pretty incredible. And then the electrical energy, 134.83 terawatt hours, comparable to the consumption of Sweden, annualized. So extremely, the energy use is just extreme. And it has caused the adoption to be slower of the technology. Who wants to support an initiative that's harmful for the environment at this magnitude? But things are changing. You know, these brilliant folks that created this technology, they weren't really surprised by it. They were already working on ways to provide consensus, these different computer models differently that doesn't require a lot of energy consumption. So let's look at Ethereum. Ethereum is the second biggest cryptocurrency, but it's also one of the leading blockchain environments for non-cryptocurrency, for things like tokenizing assets, things that aren't necessarily related to money, smart contracts, different things there. They were very much the leader in that respect. But you see what's happened here. So they were marching along similar to Bitcoin based on the proliferation of cryptocurrencies, and it was escalating, the energy consumption use. And then just last month, you see this enormous drop. Just last month this happened. It's called the merge. It was an Ethereum merge, and it brought down energy consumption to nearly zero. And that's kind of where it's at now. They changed the way the model that validates transactions to a different model that doesn't require energy intensity as it is here. And it is working great, and you don't have the problems that you saw in the previous slide. They're embracing this, it's working. It's one of the reasons, though, that this technology hasn't been embraced beyond cryptocurrency into other areas. They're fixing it. Challenge number 3. It's very, I would say, difficult to use some of these technologies and applications that are based on this newer technology. You expect some of the users to know what public and private key cryptography is, and you expect them to download these crazy applications that seem a little strange to them in order to interoperate with these other applications. It just doesn't seem natural. So you imagine if you had to download an application and install something just to go and do an Amazon purchase, it just wouldn't work. And that's the reason why you're seeing this slow adoption in some cases. It's just confusing, you know, wake me up whenever it's simple. But things are changing because they are becoming more simple now and embedded. And this is a great quote from Leonardo da Vinci. It says, "Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication," and I couldn't agree more. You don't need to know how electricity works to use the light switch. If you want your lights on, you flip the switch. If you want them off, you flip it down. That's what we need in software. That's what we need in systems. And that's what we can have in systems. So there's enormous effort underway in various web browsers, technology that's out there, to embed a lot of the requirements, a lot of the components that are necessary to interoperate with this new Web3 world that we're going to get into here in just a second. Building a great foundation to kind of get us there. So Brave browsers based on Google Chrome and Opera, they're all baking this in, and it's a smart move. Make it simple. Have an abstraction of all this complexity. So to kind of circle back here, open data standards are absolutely instrumental. And these are things that are coming about for where we are today with the adoption of this technology. The underlying infrastructure that makes this possible is becoming much more energy efficient, hardly using any in many cases, in many cases and implementations. And then the easy button has arrived, and it's happening. I listed those browsers before, but there's others that are actually adopting and embedding this technology to make your experience easier from a consumer standpoint, from a business standpoint. So the stage is set. The stage is set for the next wave. We've got these challenges. They're being solved quickly and rapidly. So now we're ready to move into the next area, Web3. Web3's ahead. So before we can really describe what Web3 is, we need to talk about what Web 1 was. So let's talk about that for a few minutes. Web 1, back in the 90s, was what's called the read-only web. Those you may remember, you could go on a website and you could read, kind of like an online brochure, to learn more about a company. So you could go and you could just read it. If you were going to a bank site, you might be able to see their interest rates or their savings rates or things like that. But really, it was just read-only. It was a brochure online. And in the 2000s up through today, we've moved into Web 2. And Web 2 is what's called the read-write web. The internet where you have interactivity. You can buy and sell, you can go on Amazon. You have social media, so you're contributing content, consuming content, very much interactive, and we're used to that. That's what we are working with today. Moving into Web 3, this is the internet of read-write ownership. So you now have the ability to own assets, to have sovereignty over your own information, and to interoperate with this new world. It has Coinbase here, IPFS, which is a distributed file system. So it's a change. It's a sea change in the way we're using these systems. From Web 1, which was read-only, Web 2, you can do interactivity, read-write. Web 3 is ownership, the web of ownership, where you are in control of your information and the assets that you manage. So you'll see here, there's several components that make up Web 3. Blockchain, as we've been talking about, digital identities is another area, AI, machine learning, decentralization. These are all characteristics that make Web3 a great next step for us and where we're heading. In the cotton side, we've talked about several things yesterday about traceability, the need for tracing information from the farm to the retailer, to the consumer. And I like to sum that up occasionally and just call it from dirt to shirt, right? That's really what we want, is to have that story, that digital connectivity, the provenance of cotton. ESG initiatives with sustainability, where the story of the farmer and the practices that they use to produce the cotton are actually journaled electronically, digital information. And then lastly, we continue to have paper-laden processes, lots of paper that doesn't serve us well on interacting with others and gaining the efficiencies that we need. And we won't get there overnight on that, but I think the recipe is coming together. The ingredients are coming together to form this recipe. So I mentioned telling the story of the farmer. That's a very important thing for us, and we're doing some of that with the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol. So the SEAM is fortunate to work with the Cotton Trust Protocol as the technology partner, and we're working with peanuts as well and soybeans. So you can imagine that food safety is certainly a component, that traceability, transparency, digitization of those supply chains is absolutely critical. And some of these technologies that we're talking about are being actively worked on with various initiatives, some very soon to be released. So verifiability, authenticity, ultimately leading to trust in the transaction. Is this information valid? Is it good? Does it have integrity? That's really where we're going. And so are these guys. All right, we all know about the blue badge fight going on with Twitter now. But it's meant to be a verification, authentication, authenticity badge. So let's talk about tokens for a minute. So we're in what's called the token economy. Everything is being digitized or tokenized. But a token is really an abstract digital representation of some fact, in quotes, a claim, or an object. And those objects can be physical or non-physical, these tokens. They can represent something physical and non-physical. They can also be fungible, interchangeable with others, or non-fungible, totally unique assets that are being represented. And you can think about where some of this might play in with cotton. Now let's just look quickly at the real estate side and ownership there. So you think about today, you have real estate where a single person may have full ownership of the house, of the real estate piece of property. But with this tokenized world that we're going in, you have the possibility of fractional ownership of a given piece of property. And what does that mean? Are there opportunities there? And I think there are, and you're seeing a lot of advancement in this space in the real estate side. But let's circle back to cotton. So cotton bale, the identity preservation of a cotton bale is great for representing this particular physical unit as a non-fungible token, NFT, and we'll talk about what those are. But also CO2, you can have a token that represents a certain quantity there that can be interchanged, managed as an asset, exchanged between others. And then you have digital art. We'll talk about the Bored Ape Yacht Club. I don't know how many people have heard of this, but this is non-fungible tokens for collectibles. And this is digital art. And you can own these and trade these between parties, and it's happening, all right? So just a quick side note on this. A lot of people said, well, if I have this digital art, can I not just copy that? I mean, I can screenshot this picture of this crazy ape and have it on my phone, or I can have it somewhere. So where's the value? Well, the value is in the artist that actually created this digitally signs the data that's represented by the string of numbers, in this case, of the picture of the cat, and provides the authenticity of the information and can verify that that is absolutely a unique collectible. You may think this is kind of silly, but here's some interesting stats just this morning. So in the last 7 days, there's been 72 of these NFTs sold, non-fungible tokens that represent unique art. In this case of what's called the Bored Ape Yacht Club, there's a limited supply of these. So there's about 10,000 of these pictures that are out there. So it has a scarcity component. And trading volume in the last 7 days is about 6.88 million, but the average price of one of these pieces of art is $95,000 for a picture of an ape. It's a unique collectible, and although I don't understand a lot of that, I know the up-and-coming consumers are using this. They're doing this. There's 6,390 owners of this art that's being created. But it's using the technology that I'm really bullish on, blockchain technology, to create this. But looking at the top-selling NFTs in the last 30 days, you see this top one 3 days ago sold for $551,000. This person bought it. It's been traded several times, but this person bought it. It's a collectible, and they own it, and it is verifiably owned by them and signed by the artist. It's happening in many, many other areas too. But looking at tokens in cotton. So we have, as you saw on the previous slide, the ability to create a non-fungible token that represents a unique bale of cotton. But we all know these bales of cotton get placed into containers. So much like the physical containerization and the advancements in that area, in the virtual side you have very similar capabilities. So you can exchange a non-fungible token that represents a container full of bales that are also non-fungible tokens. So the aggregation hierarchy is intact, or you can represent those. You can exchange one token that represents a container instead of sending 90 individual NFTs. So that was something I think was very important to do. And the technology's there, and it's an open standard, and it's supported, and it's being used. So those are exciting. And all this comes together in what's known as digital twins. So you have a physical ship that has containers on it, and you're going to track different movements that go on there, but you also have the equivalent digital version of those that can be managed and tracked and data emitted on it. And there's a big growing movement towards more digital twins and in that particular space. Artificial intelligence is actually coming together too. That was one of the main components of Web3 that's here. And Ron's message yesterday rang true, where your competitor in the futures markets, 85% of the transactions were from computers, robots. That's your competitor. You know, that's an interesting stat. But it's going to only get more difficult. I say more difficult. It'll be a lot easier, but it could be more challenging because artificial intelligence is here in a major way, and it's becoming very easy to use. So DALL-E 2 is an open source initiative that has just recently been released, and it provides artificial intelligence capabilities for pictures, digital art as well. So just to test this out, I got a beta version of OpenAI, which is this artificial intelligence platform. And I said, all right, I'm going to see how this thing works. And so I typed in, show me a surrealist, dreamlike oil painting by Salvador Dali of a dog playing chess, right? Create that picture for me. And that's what it created. This picture doesn't exist anywhere on the planet. I created it just by natural language input. I told it what I wanted, and the more details you can give it, the better the models are at providing it. I mean, I don't know about you, that would be kind of cool to hang in the bar in my house. I don't know, it'd be neat. I kind of like it. But you think of what this might be disrupting. It could be disrupting a lot of artists that are creating, you know, some very unique art for like album covers for music or logos for companies, whatever it might be, the AI models are getting better and better and better. So just for fun, I said, okay, this worked here. Let's see a middle-aged male computer nerd dressed for success, and I'll be damned. But no, seriously, I did take it a little further, and I said, let's create some variations of this, because that was an option. It was a right-click option that said, you want to create some variations of this picture. And so these guys, they don't exist. They look like my cousin or my brother, but the computers rendered these based on artificial intelligence models. They generated these guys. And you can see that there has some interesting challenges with that. I mean, you can see on social media, these guys can act like they're other people, but anyway, technology itself is getting better and better, and this is just a fun example of what they're doing with photos, but you can take this same idea and apply it to cotton transactions or financial models or whatever. I mean, it's really growing quickly, and this is an open API programming interface that anybody can incorporate in their systems. Now, this is just for pictures, but again, it's not just for pictures. I just wanted to show how the possibilities are coming together with this technology at our fingertips. So with open standards, the easy button, and the green movement towards the infrastructure being less energy intense, with AI, machine learning, and NFTs, we've got a lot of great things that are coming about. Let's talk about the metaverse for a minute. What is the metaverse? It's defined here as a virtual world in which people live, work, shop, and interact with others. Now again, I don't get a lot of this myself, but our up-and-coming consumers, the next generation, are. Now, how many of you in here, just as a show of hands, have actually used virtual reality, have experienced it? Anybody actually experienced it with a glass? Okay, so there's quite a few. It's getting better. It's getting cheaper. The devices are coming out. I think Meta came out with their headset a month ago. I think it's a little pricey, about $1,200. But I experienced it, too, for the first time about 3 years ago. I thought, I never was a gamer, so I didn't really see it. But I was like, all right, give me some of these goggles. I just want to see what this is about. And I was absolutely blown away with what this technology can do. They have perfected it. It's getting better. The imagery is clear. It's about immersive experiences to where you feel like you're part of it. You have presence. You're in there. You're in the game, or you're in the shopping mall. You escape into this world from the comfort of your couch. Remarkable what's going on there. Meta, formerly known as Facebook, they changed their name because they're all in. Now, you look at the Wall Street Journal or other news, they just let go 11,000 employees because it's expensive, to operate, and others are doing something similar. But I think their vision is still there, and it's still solid with what they want to do. They want to create virtual worlds and experiences for social media. And a lot of this came about during the pandemic and has just leapfrogged as far as the advancements in this space. It's really pretty impressive what's going on. Very exciting. And it's not just Meta. Microsoft is also in. And Satya Nadella says it's no longer just playing a game with friends. You can be in the game with them. Now, this isn't all just about games. I mention that because the technology sometimes that's put into games is turned into business applications. You've seen it over time. Some of these games are incredible, and then you compare them to some of these cotton systems that are out there. Let's just call it what it is. It's like, wow, we have this over here, but what is this? This is really limiting. It's really kind of sad in some cases. But it's coming together. So there's some virtual worlds that are out there, these ecosystems that provide this escape, this virtual world. Roblox is one. Second Life, Decentraland. There's others. These are just some that are very prominent out there that are being embraced by the community, and like the hundreds of thousands of millions of people that are using this today. I had to share this because, look, I'm a heavy metal fan, believe it or not. I like rock music. And Ozzy Osbourne is actually hosting Ozfest today, tomorrow, and the next day in the Metaverse for free. So this is a remarkable thing that they're doing. And it's not just Ozzy in this case. There's other artists that are doing the same thing. Sports games can be attended front row seats with your goggles on as if you're there. You're part of it. And it's really incredible. And I encourage you to just try it once, because I was very skeptical myself. But once I put them on, and I felt like I was really there, looking up, looking down, people next to me that weren't really there, and you kind of lose yourself there. But it's happening in some other areas that are hitting close to home. That was games. But your customers, the ultimate customer, the brands, the retailers, and the consumers are using this. And they've done a lot of work in the avatars, these items that actually represent you, that you want to be represented by when you're in these metaverse environments. And that can be kind of these cartoonish characters. It can be, what you see here, they're getting a little better about the way these avatars represent you while you're in these environments. And then there's some real spooky capabilities. These almost look human-like. And if you wanted to be able to look just like yourself and be in this virtual world and go shopping or whatever it is, you can do that. And I think there's some interesting possibilities for trying on clothing or exploring new things in your avatar that you're using inside of the metaverse. And so you can use these as human avatars, or you can use non-human avatars. So, but sorry, I'm not picking on Elon today. But looking at this, virtual clothing is a big deal. It's kind of become a big deal, and it's just surprising to me. I just didn't realize it was just really happening. And it is, and you'll see some interesting stats here in just a moment. But there's a neat compromise or cooperation between the physical items in the clothing stores and the virtual. So yes, you can go in these metaverse worlds and you can pick out these crazy outfits that you want to dress up your avatar with, because that's the way you want to represent yourself in these worlds. Or you can go to the store and pick up a shirt or jeans or whatever, which entitles you to the virtual representation of that piece of clothing as well. So you have the physical, you've got it. Well, so you go and buy a pair of boots or whatever it might be. You can use that in the virtual world as well. And it allows this touch point between the retailer and the consumer to be, it's pretty close. So they've got this relationship that they can now work with. Whether that entitles them to certain things, discounts, whatever it might be, they're buying these items that are branded that give them that capability. $80 billion annually in virtual goods. It's crazy. $80 billion in virtual goods spent. And it's just growing. As these metaverse environments improve and get easier and better and faster and cheaper, you're going to see this go up even higher. So let's talk about the brands that are actually doing this today. And this is not an exhaustive list. These are just a real quick view over who's embracing the metaverse from a brand perspective. Nike, they're all in with Nike Land. You can go in Nike Land, you can look around, you can buy the Air Jordan shoes that are virtual, which entitles you to get other real world shoes that get sent to you, the various things there. Other brands, Forever 21, they have a presence in the metaverse. And these are growing. These are growing every day. You see new ones. Ralph Lauren has their products and their virtual environment where you can go in and you can shop and you can interact in the metaverse with Ralph Lauren branded virtual clothing. Pretty exciting. And Tommy Hilfiger as well as D&G. But in closing, things are changing, right? And they're already talking about Web 5. So Jack Dorsey the founder of Twitter and other major systems out there said, it's not Web 3, we're actually working on Web 5. Whatever that is, I'm not sure, but I'm hoping that we'll be talking about that with you soon. So just in closing, all this technology is just coming down on us, right? You've seen the advancements over time from Web 1, from Web 2 to Web 3. The technologies are maturing. It's becoming easier. Data standards, in the case of our industry, are coming together. And we need to do more than just shipping. We need to look at it from other areas of the industry and how we can provide standards that allow that interoperability, that allow us to use this technology to bring and drive efficiencies throughout the industry. And it's not a fun area to think about data standards, but it is an absolutely necessary area. But the other components are coming together with AI, machine learning. Blockchain is an underlying fundamental fabric that's going to make that possible as well. But an industry that works together wins together, and I think where we can collaborate and explore these, some will work and some won't, I think it behooves us to do so. Thank you. And I think there may be some questions, I'm not sure. Well, if there are, there's a Slido link, I think, as if you were in the sessions yesterday. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to entertain some. No questions. Everyone's ready to go use the Metaverse. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark.
Yep.
Mark, thank you very much indeed for that absolutely fantastic whiz around Web3 and the Metaverse. I've learned myself that a job I did 27 years ago as a data standards guy actually was ahead of its time, perhaps. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you want to take a couple of these questions?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Bill. So there are a couple of questions. The first one is, when and what do you think will be the mental impact on society for people living in this virtual world? That is a little bit concerning to me. I mean, I think as we've seen during the pandemic, a lot of folks just were in their rooms and things like that, and there's a trend towards just isolation that's going on. So a lot of the kids or whatever are just staying indoors, and they're not going out as much, and that's sad to me. You know, you see that, and I do think that is something that has to be considered. Is what is this really going to do? Yes, it's powerful. Yes, it's fun to go and attend a concert with your virtual reality headset on, or a game, or whatever it might be. But is that going to drive even more of the isolation for people? So I think that's a good question and a concerning point. So another question is, how can we bring technology in cotton? Well, I think there's a lot underway with the standards, and I mentioned the DCSA that's doing a lot of fine work there, but I think we need to do more within our own space where we can work together. And I think the technology is absolutely here, so we're using a lot of the technology ourselves that we described in our various systems, and it's becoming easier and more integrated in the browser technologies that were mentioned earlier. So I think there's an enormous opportunity with cotton, particularly with the challenges that have been met, and we just need to start exploring that further, because I think the time is critical. Another question is, with the crypto winter still going on, do you see cryptos coming back? As currencies are exploding all around, wasn't this the time for cryptos? Yeah, I mean, if you go back to that slide I showed, it was just right after the pandemic that we had this explosion in cryptocurrencies. And I don't know, was it stimulus money where people, were sitting at home and they were, I'll just go and buy some crypto now that I can through exchanges that didn't exist the years before, like Coinbase, who's made it very simple. So, those are some areas. And if I had the crystal ball to say, what are cryptos going to look like, I wish I had that. But I think it's a technology that it's not going anywhere. It's an asset class that's not going away, and you know it's something to be mindful of. Another question here, as an example, in the Ralph Lauren world, what are the costs of goods? It's a good question. I'm not familiar with that. I'm not sure what the costs would be. There's another question about, will there not be a massive impact on business travel when using the metaverse for virtual or holographic meetings? I think part of what their Meta, at least, and Microsoft are doing are looking to replace the business meetings with the virtual reality as much as they can to save on the air travel. I mean, I know there's nothing that can replace an across-the-table meeting, and we've been in Zoom meetings, and we have Zoom fatigue and all that, but I think the more realistic those worlds can be, where you actually feel like you're part of in a boardroom or around the table, the better. But I also find it might be difficult to put on a mask and sit there. You just feel kind of silly, but I think the technology is getting better. It's not going to be these huge masks that you put on. It might be augmented reality with a pair of glasses that look normal, like a pair of Ray-Bans with augmented reality and things like that. Will there be a Web 4? Absolutely. You know, this technology keeps advancing, and you can certainly see that that's going to come together. Another thoughts on the use of AI in collision detection in autonomous vehicles. Well, there's Tesla for you. They are continually tracking information in all the Tesla cars that are going down the road to capture data so that they can better predict what might happen in this situation. They're learning about the environment that the systems are, and so it's just getting better and better over time. Let's see, another question. Cotton XML 2.0, how can we make cotton data standards work this time? Great question. What's the next step? There was some efforts underway 4 or 5 years ago to create definitions around cotton standards, whether that was defining the HVI classing information and the data that's there using standard terms and syntax. I think it was sort of shelved at the time, and the problem is who's going to own it, who's going to govern it, and who's going to pay for it, right? And I think a lot of these initiatives are better open source, where multiple parties can collaborate and contribute to the overall good of what the initiative's about. And I think in the case of DCSA, if you look at that as a model, they are funded, but they're funded through grants and other contributions of the carriers that were mentioned or listed on the slides there. Let's see. Do you think virtualization of fashion will lead to more personalization of physical fashion? Yes, I do. I think there's a lot of opportunity there in the virtualization of clothing and what you might be able to do there. And I mentioned earlier, there's not a real connection between the consumer and the brand when you go today and buy a pair of blue jeans or a shirt. It's pretty much severed. You don't have that ability to reach out to that consumer. You don't know who they are as a brand. But with this tokenized environment where they'll be able to do so, then you know, through the NFTs and the virtual clothing, then I think you have that direct line where you can do more. You can personalize things to the consumer that's actually participating in that area. Let's see. Where can we go to look for the various art generators? Yeah, that was actually pretty cool. So the group is openai.org, openai.org, and the name of the machine learning model is called DALL-E, D-A-L-L-E, and it's open source and it's free. So you can go in and explore the capabilities using natural language description of what you're interested in from an art perspective, and just play around with it. It's truly fascinating, and it just takes seconds to render what you saw, the dog playing chess. It was just a few seconds and it rendered that, and that's totally unique based on what I typed in. It doesn't exist anywhere, so those are fascinating. It allows you to kind of tinker around with AI. What is it? And you see what's going on in the space. Okay. Has anyone successfully shipped cotton and been paid using blockchain? Yes, years ago there were some transactions using blockchain, but at the time it was really a controlled test. So it's kind of like you key in something here and you walk over to this machine and you put it in here and you say you use the technology. There really wasn't a whole lot of true use of the technology. It was more of a pilot to see how this occurs. But I will say that there's lots of settlements using crypto, and you may already be doing this yourselves in the cotton space. So instead of settling with wire transfers and whatnot, there's actually a lot of settlements going on with cryptocurrencies. And we didn't talk much about this, but the cryptocurrency space, if you've seen, is very volatile. But they also have cryptocurrencies that are pegged 1-to-1 to the US dollar. So there's no volatility. They call them stable coins. So those are great for pricing things. So you wouldn't necessarily want to go to the supermarket and use Bitcoin to buy a loaf of bread because the price is going to go up and down, have these huge swings from the time you buy it to the time you actually walk out the door. But stable coins and cryptocurrency are great for these types of settlements and instant transfer between parties. So that you'll see a lot of that growing. I'm seeing a little bit of that now going on, and I think we'll see a lot more in the future.
Mark, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And thanks for taking those questions ad hoc. It's been terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we break very quickly, just on behalf of one of our partner organizations, the Bangladesh Cotton Association, would very much like everyone to be aware of the Global Cotton Summit that will be held in Dhaka, Bangladesh on the 20th and 21st of January 2023 in Dhaka, Global Cotton Summit. And you'll get a notification about that on your app. The next session, Kim Kitchings will be with us at 11:30. So please grab yourself a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, and then be back inside for 11:30. Thank you.